Welcome back. I hope all are doing really well and good. So, from this video, we are going to learn a new topic from the chapter 12 environmental issues. So, in our previous class, we have already learned about the basics about environment and the pollutants, what is pollution, and we also learned about air pollutions and how does air pollution take place and what are the major factors that contributes to air pollution and the consequences of air pollution, as well as how government has implemented many laws to prevent the air pollution. So all these things we have already learned in our previous class. So today we are going to learn a new topic, which is water pollution. So we all know water is an essential resource for all living beings on the planet. So without water, it is very difficult for organisms to survive. So say for example, we human body, right? It's been reported that we consist around 60% of water content in an adult body. So imagine that if we don't get proper water, then we will be in a very dire situation in future, right? Of course, even now we are facing dire situation. So you might even recall that nowadays we don't drink tap water. We are depending on the RO water, which we get it from the water cans, right? So this is how like water pollution leads to other consequences. So let's talk about the water resources that we have in our planet. So we have generally four water resources. The first one is marine water, which is nothing but the seas and oceans are known as marine water. Then you have estuarine water. Estuarine water is a place where the fresh water goes and mix with the sea or salt water. So say for example, we know that all rivers will finally go and mix with the seawater, right? So the region where it actually meets, right, is known as estuarine region. So this estuarine region supports high biodiversity due to its unique characteristics. So we don't want to get to know more about the estuarine water. Just know what is estuarine water. Then we have freshwater systems such as lakes, rivers, ponds. All these things are known as freshwater system. And finally, we have underground water, which has been stored for a very long time. So beneath our Earth's surface, we have underground water, and that is also being depleted due to continuous exploitation without properly utilizing them. So these are the water resources that we have. Okay. So another important thing about water is that it has two dimension. One is quantity and another is quality. So we know what is quantity. Quantity means an amount of particular thing. For example, we can say the particular pond or lake has some cubic millimeter of water. Okay, likewise, it has a quality. So quality, it simply describes or means that the physical, chemical, biological, and aesthetic properties of water. So what do I mean by physical, chemical, biological, and aesthetic property? So physical mean we know that physical parameter like how the temperatures in the water and how the pH, turbidity, all these things are properly is there or not. And chemical properties or the nutrients and other chemicals such as nitrate, ammonia, phosphorus, and other minor elements. All these things are known as chemical properties. Biological properties are nothing but like all the living organism which has life in it, right from the algae to the high predatory organisms such as big fishes like that. Okay. So and aesthetic appearance means like the smell as well as the transparency in the water is known as aesthetic property. So all these things are collectively known as quality of the water. Okay. So let's get to know more about water pollution. So let's see the definition of water pollution. So when does water pollution occurs? When there is a change in the chemical, physical or biological quality of water that has harmful effect or effects on living organisms that consume it or live in it. Okay. So let I already told you in the beginning of the video what are physical, biological, chemical characteristic of water. So let's see how this physical, chemical, biological quality of water changes due to pollution. So we know how pollution occurs. Pollution occurs due to pollutant. So how does this changes takes place in an aquatic or water environment? So we know in a water environment everything is already in a stable or constant composition. For example, the chemical properties of water is always the same. Okay, it is a cycle. Likewise, the physical property is always the same. So based on physical and chemical properties that exist in the water, the biological quality of water will be very healthy. So we know what are biological quality. Biological quality is nothing but the composition of living plants and animals in an aquatic environment. So how the changes takes place? The changes takes place due to the man-made material that is being released into the aquatic environment or natural causes such as earthquake and volcanoes and algal blooms. All these are natural causes, but when you compare with natural causes, man-made changes are the worst because we tend to introduce more contaminant and pollutants into an aquatic environment. As you can see from these two pictures, you can see clearly in one pipeline they are discharging effluent or sewage from an industry or somewhere else. Likewise, this is a lake where this lake is completely be dumped by lot of plastics. So what happens when you introduce a pollutant into an aquatic environment? Say for example, you just put lot of plastics on a small pond. Okay, let's consider a small pond. So you put lot of plastics. So we know any environment or any habitat, there will be primary producers. So the primary producer of aquatic environment or algae or phytoplankton, we say that. So this plastics, right? Once you keep on dumping into this lake or pond, what happens? That will actually prevent the entry of sunlight. So once the entry of sunlight is been prevented, the temperature, the physical property of water is changed. And what happens afterwards? The organisms, especially these primary producers, they require sunlight to do photosynthesis. So their population gets decreased. When their population is gets decreased, again the food chain will get affected. Likewise, when you release an effluent or discharge, that will contain lot of chemical composition or chemical concentration. So we know in aquatic environment already we have a proper concentration of chemical substances such as nitrate, nitrite, and chemical compounds like nitrate, nitrite, phosphate, and silicate. All these are very essential for the living organism, especially for primary producers. So when you release this effluent, this sewage and other effluent that contains lots of chemical compounds like household waste contains lot of nitrites. Likewise, the discharge that comes from the industry also consists lot of chemicals in it. Some are really toxic, such as lead, cadmium. All these are known as heavy metals. These are very toxic. So when you release them into the lake or aquatic environment, again that will change the equilibrium. So we know what is equilibrium, right? Equilibrium, right? A constant state, like there is no change in it. So because of this man-made materials, when you introduce an aquatic environment, that changes this physical chemical properties. So when there is a change in physical and chemical properties of water, the biological quality will get affected, of course, right? The living organism that lives in it. So let me just give you with an example. So if you look at this picture, you can see this is a coral reef environment. It is known as coral reef environment. Actually, it presents in the coastal bodies of water. So it is a healthy environment which is of no pollutant is being surrounded. Okay. So let's see this picture. The same environment, once a load of plastics and other pollutant has been introduced, has been completely destroyed, and you cannot find any life forms. The beautiful coral reefs are not here. The fishes which has been associated with this coral reef has also been eradicated and moved to another place. So this is how pollutant create a great threat to the biodiversity as well as for the living organisms that exist in the aquatic environment. So let's see the sources of water pollution. So, though we have natural causes such as algal blooms, earthquake, and volcanoes, all these create pollution to water environment. The threat and impact for the aquatic environment is far lesser than the human man-made pollution that creates to the aquatic environment. So generally we have three types of sources: point sources, non-point sources, leaks and spills. Let's see about point sources. Point sources are nothing but a discharge that comes from the specific locations which can be traced. We will know where it actually comes from. For example, sewage, factory effluents, and underground mines, oil wells, oil tankers, and agriculture. So these are point sources. Like you will be able to track down where this pollutant is being originated, like from which industry or from which factory it is been released or discharged. So we'll be able to track it down. Non-point sources are something that we cannot trace it. So this happens due to acid rain, dumping of the plastic in water bodies. So when you dump a plastic in the water body due to wind, it just keeps on, wandering around. Especially in oceans and seas and all, in different countries, they dump huge quantity of plastic waste into the ocean. So as I told you in my previous class, I told you in oceans and seas we have water currents that will carry the water plastic from different region where it is being dumped to another region. So you will not be able to track it down where this pollutant is being originated. And likewise agricultural chemical runoff. So because like when rain comes, you don't know from which region. We know that all water will finally aggregate and reach into this river or some place where it actually collects huge amount of water. So likewise we'll not be able to track it down from which region this chemical runoff from agriculture cropland has been originated. And the third one is leaks and spills, which this occurs mainly due to the collision of oil tanker ships. Okay, due to ship collision. So and also offshore oil rigs. So offshore oil rigs, if you are really wondering what it is, actually oil rigs are it's a platform actually that exist in the sea ocean. Like it will be like a platform which is constructed on the seabed that they will try to exploit or take resources from the seabed. So those are known as offshore oil rigs. So offshore means that is far away from the coastal zone. So you can see the clear image of how oil pollution has created a huge discoloration of the ocean surface water. And so when compared to this thing, this leaks and spills create a huge threat to the aquatics ecosystem, because this will change the chemical and physical properties of water very soon. For example, once this oil has been spilled or leaked, what happens? It actually prevents the entry of the light at first, and it will reduce the dissolution of oxygen. Finally, it will create a death to many organisms that actually lives in this region. So we also have another three types of sources for water pollution. We have municipal waste, industrial waste, agricultural waste. So municipal waste includes the waste that we create from our homes, restaurants, commercial establishments like restaurants, shops. All these things, they will either take their waste, plastic material and everything, either they'll put it into some or dump into some land area, or simply they'll discard it into nearby water environment, a river or lake or pond. Industrial waste also being released into the aquatic environment. So this will contains the effluents and toxic heavy metals such as cadmium, chromium, lead, organic or inorganic chemicals. So all these things are sometimes toxic when it is released in high quantity. So then it will affect the temperature and dissolved oxygen. So it will reduce the dissolved oxygen concentration as well as the affects the temperature of the water body. Agricultural waste, we know that we use a lot of fertilizers and pesticides. So this fertilizer and pesticide after harvesting will be on the sand. So during raining monsoon or raining time, due to runoff, all these pesticide residues and fertilizer residues will be washed away by the rainwater, and finally it reaches to the river, lake or pond nearby region, right? And also this includes sawdust from logging operations and bacteria from sewage or livestock operations. So all these things are from agricultural waste. So let's see the effects of water pollution on ecosystem. So in my previous chapter, when I explained you what is ecosystem, what are ecosystem, right? So ecosystem is a place where non-living things, abiotic factors such as water, soil, air, and temperature all interact with biotic factors such as all living organisms are known as biotic factors. So they both interact and live, make a system is known as ecosystem, right? So how this ecosystem will be affected? So due to water pollution, the first thing which will be affected is the aquatic ecosystem. Aquatic ecosystem is nothing but a pond or lake. So here in this picture we have a pond. So here abiotic factors are water, soil and air and temperature, right? Biotic factor are all living things. So you can see from the picture itself all these organisms depend on the abiotic factor for its survivability. What is abiotic factor? Water, right? Likewise here the bottom dwelling organisms also depend on soil, which is not living thing, right? Depend on the soil for its survivability. So this is how they interact and survive. So when you release a pollutant into this lake or pond, what happens? It changes the physical properties as well as the chemical properties. So when there is a change in the physical and chemical properties, what happens? Say for example, this primary producer phytoplankton or algae that exist on the surface of the water, they will utilize it in case the effluent which is released into the water has high nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrate. They will grow in abundant and create or form a bloom. So you know when a bloom is occurred, what happens? It will completely cover the surface water. Then the light penetration will be affected and the dissolution of oxygen will be affected. So the organism that lives here, right, they will also be affected because there won't be any oxygen, because due to the bloom formation the oxygen dissolution levels gets reduced. So this all are living organisms in the mid surface of the water or the bottom of the pond or lake, they will die. So this is how water pollution contributes and affects the niche and habitats of the existing ecosystem. So what is niche? Niche means each individual organism has its own specific role in ecology. Okay, so that is known as niche. So again, due to effluents or discharges that is being released, the soil fertility is also being affected. So the organism that depends on this soil water will also die, or it will their population will reduce. So finally, the habitat becomes uninhabitable. So this is how water pollution affects the ecosystem. And it also disrupt change the food chain. So how it actually change the food chain? So say I told you this lead and cadmium are very toxic heavy metals. So when these are taken up by the primary consumer, then they can be lethal or get stored. So let's see how the food chain, like the trophic level in food chain. So primary producer, because some of you still don't know what are primary producer, primary consumer, so I just put this example here. So if you look at this picture, you have primary producer. Primary producer means phytoplankton in the aquatic environment, we can say microalgae. And here in terrestrial environment we have plant. So they synthesize their own food, that is why we call them primary producer, and this is the basis of the food chain, right? So this primary producer will be consumed by the primary consumers, the small level consumer. Okay, say for example in aquatic environment you have a zooplankton. Okay, so these are like eggs, small juveniles of fishes, crabs, and all these things. And here you have herbivore. Herbivore means those which goes and eat the plant, right? So these are known as primary consumer. So then you have secondary consumer. Again, this will be eaten by the big fishes, which is also known as carnivore. Likewise, this grasshopper will be eaten by the rabbit or rat, is known as carnivore. So then again you have tertiary consumer. The organism will be little bigger, that will eat the smaller animal, carnivore animal. So finally you have quaternary consumer, and it then it stops here, right? So let's see how this lead and cadmium leads into the lethal. Lethal means they will die. Okay, lethal means something related to the toxic or death of an organism. So how this lead and cadmium, when it has been taken up by the primary consumer. So say for example this primary consumers, right, this zooplankton, they actually eat or consume this phytoplankton. So this lead and cadmium also are very minute, like this phytoplankton. Sometimes this will be consumed by this zooplankton in the aquatic environment. So when this lead and cadmium, as I told you, they cannot be decomposed or digested. It will get stored into the this zooplankton. Again, this will be consumed by the carnivore. So another small fishes. So again, from one, these four zooplankton would have consumed around each four zooplankton would have consumed, say for example 10 microgram of lead and cadmium. So again each will contain 10, 10, 10. Okay, so these all four will again be consumed by one single fish. Again the concentration gets increased. So this is how it keeps on increasing. Finally it leads to the biomagnification. Again that will affect the food chain. Say for example this fish is not able to tolerate the toxic level of this lead and cadmium, and this gets I mean this will their population gets decreased. So there will be lot of other organisms which might even eat these fishes, right? So there they will face food scarcity. So this is how it affects the food web, right? So again, hot water that you release from the industry, that will also affect the aquatic density and diversity, because when you release hot water, the aquatic water temperature is reduced. So there are small organisms like zooplankton and other eggs, right? Fishes that lays eggs, right? So all these eggs require proper temperature to hatch out. So when you release hot water, that will change the temperature of the environment, and those eggs will never hatch out, and finally it leads to the reduction in the population. So this is how it affects the diversity and disrupt the food chain. So we have seen how water pollution affects the ecosystem and disrupt or change the food chain and food web in aquatic environment, right? Now let's see how it affects the organisms. So sometimes water pollution can be lethal. Lethal mean it will lead to the death of the aquatic organisms, which depend on the water body. So we know what water aquatic environment provide food for huge amount of organisms. So when especially when oil spill happens, right, what happens, it will actually prevents the entry of light and decrease the dissolved oxygens. So when there is a decrease in dissolved oxygen, then demand happens. So biological oxygen demand as well as chemical oxygen demand takes place. So we know in water constantly every chemical substance will react to other chemical substance. So oxygen will be oxidized by many chemicals, and the oxygen, so constantly oxygen is required. So uh, so when there is a decrease in dissolved oxygen due to this oil, so what happens, the chemicals that require oxygen to oxidize, right? So that demand takes place. So that is what we call chemical oxygen demand. Biological oxygen demand is nothing but all living organisms that require oxygen for survive, right, in the aquatic environment. So due to the decrease in DO, so they need more oxygen to survive. So this is what we call it, biological oxygen demand. So due to the decrease or dissolution, so from atmosphere usually the oxygen will get dissolved into the seawater or a lake or a river due to the wind. But due to this oil, right, the oil spill that actually prevent both entry of light as well as the dissolution of oxygen. Finally, that leads to the increase of biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand. Because of that, mass death takes place. So the obviously, right, organisms that lives in that region, they need oxygen to survive, as well as the quality of water has been changed dramatically. So obviously it will all die. And it will, if the worst part of the oil pollution is that it will actually clog the feathers of the birds and gills of the fish and a sea otter and all organisms, their feathers will be clogged by this oil. So that will create a huge impact on biological organisms. It not only create effects on aquatic environment, it is also a threat for humans too, because if our water is being contaminated, we there is a high chance that we might face with hepatitis and typhoid. And if there is excess amount of fluoride in the water, then it will lead into fluorosis. So, in most of the developing countries, due to the contaminated water, we are often experience outbreak of epidemic waterborne diseases. So, apart from that, this will another factor I told you about how eutrophication takes place, right? So, eutrophication takes place due to the excess amount of nutrients that is required for the algae and phytoplankton. So, when eutrophication takes place, they will completely cover the surface water, prevent the dissolved oxygen level, and all organisms that lives in this region will die. And also for the decomposition of this phytoplankton and algae, bacteria require more oxygens, right? So more, again the biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand takes place due to eutrophication. And this picture is I showed you here. There is a word given, red tide phenomena. So red tide phenomena happens in the oceans and seas due to certain phytoplankton known as dinoflagellates. So they grow in abundance and it is highly toxic even for humans and as well as other organisms which is living in this region. So this is how eutrophication looks like. So you all must have already seen, I guess. So to control this, government to control and prevent, our Indian government has implemented a lot of laws and measures. Let's see those measures. And under the Indian Constitution, it is fundamental right for every one of us to clean the water. And also the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974, Section 17 to 40, it prohibit it in it actually restrict humans and everyone to pollute the streams well by disposal of polluting matter such as plastics, other sewage, household wastes. Okay, and also the central state pollution control boards, they have the power to advise the central or state government on different matters concerning with the prevention and control of pollution of water. And the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they are the nodal agency, which means like they are the head agency and they have all the authority of the central government for the planning, promotion, coordination, and for overseeing the implementation of India's environmental and forestry policies and programs. So to prevent it, the we have to regulate or control of pollutant discharge at the point of generation where it is actually generated. and it should also be pre-treated by scientific methods. There are different methods to clean and before discharging them into natural resources, and setting up sewage treatment plants and effluent treatment plants. So near Soringalur we have one sewage treatment plant that actually run and do this treatment of sewage and other household waste that is being discharged from the in and around region of Soringalur. And also we should implement we should regulate or restrict the use of synthetic fertilizer and pesticides. We should encourage natural fertilizer and pesticide instead. And also the most important thing, we should create awareness among people, and people involvement is very essential for the prevention of water pollution. So that's all guys, hope you all understand. If you still didn't understand, please don't hesitate to contact me, and this topic will be discussed in our coming online class. Take care guys, bye.